Good morning, school board. Thank you all for being here this morning and for coming to watch my presentation. Before I start, I would like to give a special thank you to our president here, Lucas N. So I'm sure that everyone, as younger students, we would feel antsy and feel those butterflies in our stomachs when teachers in high school would tell us that we would be preparing for an exam, right? Every time that came up, I would question myself if all those tests were really necessary or if they even served a purpose. I never really took the time to research it when I was younger. However, now being in college, one of my English professors gave us a task to come up with a research question that we would have to research throughout the semester and would be responsible for gathering all types of information. I instantly thought back to the standardized exams, and that's when I developed my question. Are high school standardized tests a benefit or detriment to high school students? So according to most of my sources, standardized exams are found to be more of a detriment to these high school students. It prevents students from gaining knowledge of the outside world, and it limits the amount of learning that they do overall in schools and in certain classes as well. So the goal isn't to completely get rid of them as a whole, but instead find an alternative way to still test these students without taking away other opportunities. Our high school standardized. The first reason as to why these tests are more of a detriment are because the grades are not always accurate of these exams. So according to an article by Poston and Houston, there's different factors that can lead to a student getting questions wrong, such as situational, environmental factors, and even personal and emotional factors. So situational and environmental factors would kind of include the environment that you're in while testing. So if the student is in a colder environment, it's going to cause them to be more focused on the fact that it's really cold and chilly in the classroom instead of being completely focused on the test or just the questions that they're trying to answer. And personal factors would all include obviously personal things, so things that are happening in their household, even school related things or problems, and as well as their work if the student does work, just any outside issues that the person is having both emotionally and personally can kind of interfere with the grade overall. And this is obviously unfair. I would find it unfair because universities focus mainly on these test results to determine if a student is even eligible to enter the university, as like disregarding the fact that several other factors are being put into this that can then lead to lower test scores. The first reason. Another part of my research said that students are being categorized as more or less intelligent, and they're being separated accordingly into different groups. Tate in his article actually mentioned how people, and obviously teachers in specific, and just staff within the schools, separate their students by those who are more intelligent from those who struggle or need that extra help. And he then also makes his point clear and mentions that obviously the teachers should not be splitting students into these groups. Separating students into different groups according to their intelligence is only creating those titles for them, and creating those titles for them is only going to harm their education in the long run, because it's also going to affect their self-esteem. So they're obviously feeling that they're already less of, not necessarily a person, but they're just less intelligent than people around them. So the fact that they're kind of putting them on the spot like that and everything is affecting their results on the test, because again, kind of relating to the first part, where that's when it would go into their personal and emotional state of mind, and that would interfere with the grades that they then receive in that class. Different sections of my research also pointed out the fact that instead of learning about actual life and situations occurring around them, students are pushed more towards earning high test scores. So Adele, in one of her presentations and video, actually mentioned that being given tests, teachers are only by giving only tests, teachers are only preparing students to be good test takers and not allowing them to show their true potentials. The world often asks teenagers to have knowledge about what's occurring around their surroundings, or they're expected to make the correct and right decisions when it comes to difficult tasks. However, how is this possible when all they're doing or being taught in school is how to properly take an exam and nothing more? So when people are expecting students to know what's going on around the world or just general ideas that, or even when it comes down to like politics and all that, which a lot of people don't really know about, um, students and younger adults are being blamed for this and kind of said to be not informed or anything, when in schools they should be learning about the outside world and how to better themselves for the future and themselves. Instead they're just being pushed to earning high test scores and um maintaining, I don't want to say like it's okay to have bad grades, but maintaining those expectations that teachers want because they need those high test scores. However, it would be much more beneficial to them to kind of be able to function out in the outside world and not just in a seat with a piece of paper and a pencil in front of them. Also, schools are spending way too much money on standardized exams. Um, Joriels, Joriels in her article argues that there's two big arguments against standardized exam. One being that the exams are not necessary, and the second one that despite that they are considered a benchmark, the costs are extremely high. And we could all agree that um, standardized exams do cost a lot of money for the schools, and that the amount of money that is being spent on these exams should instead be utilized to improve a school and to even potentially purchase new material to improve a student's learning experience and environment. So instead of having these big exams and testing these students all the time, why don't people in the school boards or even like faculty in the school, teachers, try to invest more on books and maybe computers that would then advance a student's learning and not be so close-minded and so just focused on, again, these test scores and these exams all the time. Teachers are not able to fully teach as they're told to focus more on preparing students for these tests as well. In a piece titled How Standardized Tests Shape and Limit Students' Learning, it was said that teachers have less time teaching in classrooms and they lose up to 60 to 110 hours due to testing and being expected to spend more, and they're being expected to spend more time on practice tests. And obviously, all of this kind of just narrows their curriculum and what they're able to execute to the class, as instead they're asked to prioritize test taking tips and how to help a student pass these exams and not really teach them what the curriculum or what is supposed to be taught. Some argue that the test may be beneficial, but it's only benefiting the wrong group in a sense. Gothrop quotes that the test is far more useful to administration. And he is, in a sense, correct. The test is more being utilized to determine what teachers are doing their jobs and what schools need extra funding. And even they're even able to tell what schools have to be shut down, obviously due to low test scores. And at the end of the day, the students are not really gaining anything from these exams other than obviously the skills. And yes, maybe colleges do take a look at them, which I'll get into that later on. But overall, it's mostly for administration and finding out how teachers are doing and even how schools are doing and what can be done to kind of either close down schools or fire teachers and all of that. These exams are also kind of limiting what a student is able to do. So students are told that they can study and do whatever they desire, but then again, these exams are kind of setting a limit to what they can do. Adele again in her video mentioned how teenagers are often have the big idea of wanting to make their mark, but they do not have the chance to make decisions about their own education. So, um, having these tests kind of, I would describe it as having these tests kind of determines the future of certain students in an unfair way. Like I said before, there are multiple factors that can kind of alternate or make these test scores go wrong. So when a student does not receive a good enough score or the perfect score, several doors are then instantly shut because of these tests again. And instead of being able to keep going with what they wanted to pursue, they are now limited to certain things or certain things now because they didn't receive the perfect score that certain universities or schools are looking for. Majority of the time, these standardized tests do not even count as an actual grade to that specific course. So, in an article titled "Is the Use of Standardized Exams Improving Education in America?" It was written that older students, juniors specifically, do not take the test serious as it does not count towards their grade. And it's completely fair to mention that the tests are still required because it's what universities, like I said, are looking at. Yet there should be other ways to determine the acceptance of a student into university rather than just making them based on these exams and sometimes do not count. Since they sometimes don't really count for their overall grade, students aren't really taking them serious, which in the long run is only affecting again their education as a whole. Majority of the time these My final point is that having these standardized exams is limiting the student's learning experience all around. So Gothrop and Herpes mentions how several limitations are presented with these exams. So standardized tests limits the teacher's ability to teach and the student's ability to learn. Since everything is revolving around the idea of a test, other material is forgotten, and everything is shaped so that a student can become a great a great test taker and gain a higher test score. So I guess overall the answer to my question of are high school standardized exams a benefit or detriment to high school students would be that yes, it's a detriment. However, um, we all know that these tests are needed. Obviously, universities look at them. So it's not completely getting rid of them as a whole, like I mentioned earlier. It would just be to find the balance of being able to give a test, maybe that isn't as large as these standardized exams are, but still a smaller test that university could look at. So finding the balance between that and still being able to properly educate a student about what they need to function in the outside world and just different experiences that they might encounter and how to handle them appropriately. So thank you, school board, for being here with this morning with me today and for listening to my presentation. And this is my works cited page with all the sources that I mentioned in the PowerPoint.